Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Ram, for this wonderful introduction. Let me come straight away to the talk. And it's a tea time with beetles. So tea time, as Ram was saying, also is snack time. And if you were snacking with the Galo or Nishi people from Arunachal, this is probably what you might get as a special treat from the beetles. There are some beetles, there are several beetles that they take as food. So I have featured here for you a few of them so that you have a general idea of how they are consumed, what they are. The first one of them is, this is the one. I hope all of you can hear me. Am I clear?
Yes, you're
Ram?
clear, and we can see your mouse as well.
Okay. So this is the Sternocera. It's a form. I mean, there are lots and lots of jewel beetle. My talk would end with another jewel beetle. So this jewel beetle is not eaten by Galo tribe, but mostly by Nishi tribe and boiled and smoked. And the next one is this, Prosopocoilus. There are several species of Prosopocoilus that are eaten. This is a stag beetle. So there's a black color stag beetle. There is a brown color stag beetle. There's a red color stag beetle. All of them. And you'll find a variety of stag beetle in Arunachal Pradesh. I mean, it seems to be an insect paradise for anybody interested in insects. This is roasted and taken with the bamboo shoots, and they usually prefer the larva of the stag beetle. Then comes this Japanese rhinoceros beetle, this one. I'll talk more about Japanese rhinoceros beetle a little later on. This is also boiled, roasted, or steamed, and is eaten both by Galo and Nishi tribe. Then is the anomala, okay? This anomala is, there are, again, different species of anomala. You'll find them everywhere. You find plenty of them in Western Ghats. You find them in Northeast India, etc. This also is roasted or boiled and eaten by Nishi. And then you have two more of them. This particular one, okay, this is the Oplatocera. It's a longhorn, it's a Trichonotoma, which is a borer beetle, which is smoked, roasted, or boiled and eaten by Nishi. And I want to tell you something about this particular beetle, not this species, but this genus. It's, you know, that the beetles have these shining, iridescent elytra, their outer wing, they're shining, which is why they are sought after in craft, art, etc. In this case, this particular beetle, its chitin actually fluoresces. So it's just not that it is iridescent, but it fluoresces, and this fluorescent property is restricted to certain kind of beetles only, and this is one of them. This particular beetle is from Western Ghats, but the species from, I don't have a photograph of that particular species from Arunachal. That one actually fluoresces, and it is again smoked, roasted, boiled in any one of them, and only by the Nishi. Most of these are eaten by the Nishi tribes, not so much by the Galo. And of course, the last of it is this longhorn beetle. Again, there are several longhorn species that are smoked, roasted, and boiled and eaten by Nishi. So here is a taste of tea time snack to start with. And I will go on to the first of the stories. And it's always the beginnings, is always the story of evolution. The story of evolution of insects is perhaps one of the most fascinating stories you can come across. Okay. Yes, 1 out of every 4 animals is a beetle. 40% of insects are beetles. And if J.B.S. Haldane said an inordinate fondness for beetles, it's not, it's something that I'm sure everybody would agree that nature has somehow found beetles to be one of those creatures that seem to be able to withstand some of the most uncomfortable climates for them. And they have diversified so much. If they can be 1 out of every 4 animals is a beetle, it talks about their resilience, their ability to withstand unfavorable conditions, okay? And according to Grimaldi and Engel, two researchers, and who have written this lovely book on evolution of insects, they say that beetles are diverse probably because they are the only flying insects besides ant to have thoroughly invaded cryptic niches on the ground. So what are these characters that gives them this, allows them to occupy these cryptic niches? There are four main characters that, I mean, there are several, but these four main characters are somehow a little bit more important than the others. And the first of them is their wonderful outer elytra, you know. This elytra is so thick, and what it does is it completely covers their sides. You know, you can't make out their, but if you see, it completely covers everywhere. You can't see their sides, you can't see their undersides. It so completely covers them that they are protected from desiccation. You know, their spiracles, the breathing tubes, breathing openings on their sides are protected, doesn't allow moisture to escape. And because it doesn't allow moisture to escape, and because the moisture is kept within inside, they're also protected from microorganisms, fungi, etc. The other character is that this elytra protects the wing beneath it, which is used for flying. Okay, I mean, any of you, I'm sure most of you have seen beetles fly. They open out their thick elytra and the hind wing comes out. Now, there is a particular way by which the beetle is able to fold its hind wing, and it has its muscles beneath it that help to fold it and keep it, you know, tuck it away, both horizontally and vertically inside. There's a mechanism of folding in there that keeps it very safe and well protected and tucked away inside. That's the other one. The third feature is the way the pronotum, that is the first of the thoracic segment, is articulated with the rest of them, that also allows for a certain kind of movement and also protection. And of course, the fourth one is that you will find that even the legs, the underside, is protected by elytra. So basically the elytra is, and the elytra, if you notice, doesn't have, you don't find any kind of venation or anything like that. This actually has been a problem for many of the evolutionary biologists, because one of the features that the taxonomists use for identification is the venation, the veins present on the wings. You will notice that unlike if you see a butterfly or if you see a dragonfly or any of the other insects, you'll find that they have a pattern of veins on their outer wing. But in the case of the beetles, the have any venation outside. So if you look for fossils, you'll find that most often one of the parts that are fossilized is their outer wing, but that serves very little to identify what kind of beetle it is. So this character, so how does this character, because of the elytra and because it is completely covered, you'll find that they can go and hide themselves under the bark, or they can go and hide themselves beneath the soil without having to worry about whether they're going to get infected with fungi or other microorganisms, etc. They can just crawl anywhere. You'll find that their inner organs are all well protected, will not be damaged. And therefore, it allows them access to certain small habitats, what called as niches, habitat niche, small habitats, very small places that, you know, they are well protected. And that's probably why you find so many stories emanating from ancient cultures about them. Imagine nomads, human beings who were nomads once upon a time, and they're removing a stone or they are pulling out a bark or something, and they find a beetle underneath there. So, you know, it's like ancient Indians and beetles kind of lived so close to each other that stories come out of them. Now, the ancestors of modern beetles actually resembled what insects that are known as lacewings, antlions. Have you heard of them? Owl flies, Dobson flies, etc. So this is a beetle here. This is a false blister beetle. And this is a lacewing. and this is an antline. Now, if you look at the fossil, this is one of the oldest confirmed fossil from Permian, which is called as Coleopsis archaica. Look at this, and you'll find that it's almost like this antline or this lacewing, except that whereas an antline, lacewing, or even a Dobson fly have transparent wings like this, these had a hardened elytra like the beetle. So this is one of the oldest beetle that is being found over there. Now, if you go back and look at the story of evolution, elytra, I mean, ancient beetles were more flat and they had shorter antenna, shorter legs, etc. But a lot more about the behavior of beetles came from what are known as ichnofossils. Okay, ichnofossils, there are 2-3 kinds of ichnofossils. One of them is coprolites. Coprolites are the petrified dung remains of dinosaurs. You know, the which also talked, I mean, these coprolites talked not only about beetles, but it also gave inklings as to what the dinosaurs were eating also. So within the dinosaurs' petrified dung, they found dung balls, and not just dung balls with eggs of certain scarabids. Okay, then a certain kind of ichnofossils were petrified leaves, barks. Beetles feed on various plant parts. So various plant parts were petrified. And so this gave inkling of the behavior of beetles rather than, just an elytra or a part, which you have to then reconstruct everything. So very rarely you get fossils where you can actually get to know more about behavior. So fossils gave the evolutionary biologists a lot more information about the beetles. And what was found within the ichnofossils was actually what was found, it was possible to examine what was found within it because they have a modern technology where they have an X-ray like machine called as synchrotron microtomography. This allowed them to look very minutely into what was present within the coprolites of dinosaurs. And similarly, they examine the feeding part of a petrified leaf, etc. So that provided them with information that also said that by the time it was Triassic and Jurassic, the dinosaur times, most of the beetles that resemble modern day beetles had already arrived on Earth. And going further down, they found all these are petrified remains from a skull of a camel. Just a camel skull. This is from the tar pits of California. These are all 44,000-year-old fragments from a camel species, which they nicknamed as Clyde, which has gone extinct. However, all those beetle remains that they found, they also discovered that all these beetles are alive till today. So the camel has gone extinct. The beetles have not. And this is during the Pleistocene epoch, that is the Quaternary time period. And all of these are beetle remains. Therefore, this kind of tells you how resilient beetles are. Whereas the large mammals went extinct, these small little beings somehow survived and continued. And they continue today. They continue to radiate. They continue to expand. They looked for more niches. Their behaviors change. And there are a whole lot of other things. And some of the more interesting things, you probably have to read it in my book, which I'm writing. And unfortunately, I can't share that with you right now due to my contract details with the publisher. But there's a lot more to beetles in their evolutionary journey than what I have briefly mentioned over here. So that's one story. The next story is how beetles allowed Edgar Allan Poe to invent the word cryptograph. We talked so much about cryptography, right? The word cryptograph was invented by Edgar Allan Poe for his story, The Gold Bug. Actually, this entire short story is available online for anyone as PDF for anyone who wants to read it, okay? It's a detective genre, this Gold Bug, and it's about people who live in a small island, okay? It's again somewhere in North America, and they discover a scarab beetle with skull mark on it. And this gentleman who discovered, he is very fond of collecting mollusks, beetles, insects, etc., trying to identify them. He's kind of probably a bit like me, an amateur taxonomist, amateur entomologist, amateur naturalist, call him what you want. Okay. And he finds this, and then the marks on the beetle and the notes on the beetle leads him. I mean, everyone else in the island thinks that he's gone mad after the scarab beetle, but it leads him to find a treasure hidden away by pirates. It's a very interesting story. And so in order to find out what the marks on the beetles were, that's when, how to decipher each of those numbers and certain kind of patterns that were found on the scarab beetle. Edgar Allan Poe invented the word cryptograph, and he even won $100 grand prize for it. Of course, Harry Potter and Goblet of Fire, everybody knows, right? Where Harry and his friend were turned into a beetle. So I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm going to talk about another incredibly lovely book called The Criminal Prosecution and Capital Punishment of Animals by E.P. Evans. Okay. Now, in the 16th century, okay, in France, in Europe, people used to prosecute animals. There were trials, animals were given lawyers to talk about them, and they were given punishments, etc. And if you see this photograph, this is about a pig being tried in a court. Okay, I mean, there were such ridiculous. There in his book, there are about 200 such incidents, where they have prosecuted sparrows for chattering in the church, for pigs stealing communion wafer, for a cock laying an egg. I'm telling you, even flies and caterpillars were taken to court for charges ranging from murder to obscenity. So then, in one instance, a weevil. I hope you know that weevils are also beetles, and I call them sculpted beetles because their elytra is so beautifully designed that you would want to keep them as curios. They are such beautiful beetles, but they are pests of the worst order. I don't think any farmer would even give a second look at its sculpted elytra and say, oh, I'm going to keep it. It's a terrible pest. And in the 16th century, particularly, the weevils started attacking the grapes. So the grape owners were very angry, and they took the weevil to the court, okay, and said, no, this weevil has to be tried. It's giving us too much of trouble. Then what happened was the person in charge of trying the weevil said, no, it's very unbecoming to proceed with rashness to such a small insect. I don't think you should be trying it out. He suggested that you should instead pray, okay, ask for divine intervention and see what happens. So then what happened was all the people agreed, and they were public prayers in the church, all that happened. Unfortunately, to their good luck, the weevils all disappeared. Everybody was happy, said, the weevil is gone. However, 30 years after that, the weevils returned as a vengeance to take some kind of revenge from them. This time, the grape owner said, nothing doing, we are not having public prayers. It has to stand trial. So then a lawyer was appointed for the weevil. And the lawyer happened to be a very smart fellow. He said, come on, God didn't create weevil for nothing, right? It also has a place in the earth. It's most unfortunate that the food that God provided for it is also has to be shared by human beings. You can't prosecute it. You can't kill it. This is one creature like you. So the trial went on and on and on and on and on with no sign of either side giving it up. Finally, they said, okay, let's go for an out-of-court agreement. So an out-of-court agreement said that the grape owner said, we will provide the weevil with a space, okay, a little part in the forest where the weevil can stay, live, eat, reproduce, do whatever it wants, as long as it doesn't come into the grape farms, etc. So the lawyer said, what nonsense. If you give it a place where it doesn't have the kind of food that it wants, how will it live? I don't agree with it. He refused to agree with it. So went back and forth, back and forth. Meanwhile, there was war, there was famine, etc. And soon the judge, judge gave his verdict. However, because there was a war, nobody heard the verdict. The verdict was recorded and left in the chambers of the judge. So the war was over, and people said, let's look at the verdict. So they brought out the records. Guess what? The papers where the verdict was there were all being eaten up by insects. So nobody knew what the judge had given as verdict, and the weevils got their revenge. They went scot-free. Nothing happened. So this, I thought, was a very delightful story I should share with you all. Okay. Now, my next story on of beetles. There are several beetles that are of use to forensic people. And one of them is this particular one called as Diomysis osculensis. It's a carrion beetle. Actually, the beetles that are used in forensics could be certain species of ground beetles, certain species of ham beetles, cysterid beetles, all these kinds, Caracas beetle, etc., etc. But this particular one is most common. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that when you put up your light screens to look for moths, etc., this beetle will invariably land up over there. Now, if you see this beetle, I'd suggest that handle it with a little care, because it loves to feed, as it says, carrion beetle. It loves to feed on corpses, dead animals, etc. So it could well be carrying some kind of microorganisms, who knows what. So it's good to be a little circumspect. You cannot go there and pick up the beetle and say, oh, what beetle it is, let's examine it a little bit more, etc. Okay. Now, this carrion beetle is used in forensics because if you have a corpse and you're trying to identify the what is it called? Okay, give me a minute. Yes, it's called the postmortem interval. Okay, if you want to estimate postmortem interval, you need to get some clues from which insect lands up when. Usually, the first of the insects to land are the flies. And then the flies lay their eggs, the maggots come out. Once the maggots go away, the next to arrive are the carrion beetles. And the carrion beetles and their larvae have a longer lifespan. So these carrion beetles, this particular beetles, are used for determining postmortem intervals. Okay. I don't know how many of you have seen this series called Bones. It used to be there in the late 90s and early 20s. on Star World. And several instances, the protagonist, she uses a lot of insects and their thing to find out the time of death, etc. It's very interesting. Now, there is another beetle, okay, this one. This is used in the laboratory to clean skeletons. You know, generally when museums want to show off, present their skeletons for display, etc., or, curators want to find out the species and all, and you want to look at their skeletons, you need to clean all the flesh. Now, rather than using chemicals, which can sometimes damage the bones, change their colors, or even be harmful for people who are working with it. These beetles, called as dermestid beetles, now they are decomposers and they're flesh-eating beetles. So taxidermists use it, curators, even forensic scientists use it because it comes to eat at a late. On a corpse, dermestid beetles are probably the last of the lot to come because they love to eat on their skin, fur, all that. That's why they are used to clean skeleton. You will find that they're only small, very small, but both the adult and the larvae are used for cleaning the skeleton because they are voracious feeders. However, although they are voracious feeders, they're only this small, isn't it? They're not very big, okay? And therefore, if you have, say, for example, a large skeleton of that of some mammal, then it has been estimated that you would need 300 such beetles to clean up one skeleton. This is the Dermistis maculatus, which is used for cleaning skeletons. So, beetles have their uses, their lifestyle helps most of us to do some of our work better than others. Now, scarabs. A lot can be said about scarabs. You can have a separate talk on scarabs. So I have just picked up a few because dung beetles are something that everybody likes and is fond of. I'm showing you two photographs over here. Okay, these are there even in my article. These were prawns and shrimps that we had carried with us at Pake. We were going to look for butterflies. And to attract butterflies come to all these dead creatures for minerals, etc. We had carried them. And then when we came back to the guest house, we took them and put them under a tree, okay, because they were no longer needed and we're not going to use them the next day. This was at 7:30 p.m. I don't know how many of you have seen that movie Mummy. You see those scarab beetles that come from all sides. They come so quickly, tripping, crawling like that. Exactly like that. I mean, when I looked at the way the beetles were coming on to this remains of the prawns, etc., it reminded me of that Mummy movie only. They just came quickly. I mean, there was nothing on the ground when we left it on the soil. Within minutes, they started coming over there. And by 9 o'clock, that was, you see the right side image, that was what was left of them. Scarabs are such natural cleaners, and we say dung beetles, but not all dung beetles are rollers. Some of them roll into balls. Some of them simply live within the dung. Some of them dig through the dung, carry the dung underground to lay their eggs on them. So these are scarabs, and these scarabs are again flesh-eating ones. Now, if you look at this one, it looks like a little coconut that has been broken, isn't it? Well, this is the complete one. This is the elephant dung beetle. This is the elephant dung beetle, and this is the size of its dung ball. And this dung ball, with its larva inside, its grub inside the dung, is a great favorite of bears. So you see this one here, these are the two parts of this one. The bears have actually broken open this dung to remove the grub from inside to eat it. And this is the little elephant dung beetle, the rhinoceros beetle that produces. So usually when one sees only small dung balls, right? So this was just to show you how big a ball a dung beetle can make. And talking about rhinoceros beetles, okay, these are all rhinoceros beetles. This is the male and this is the female. And I already talked to you about this earlier when we were talking about grub. Now, these are great favorites of Japanese kids. And I don't know whether you have heard of this or not, but you can, if you go to Japan, then you can buy beetles in stores, any of their supermarkets or several stores where you buy all the other stuff for what you need for your house. They will sell beetles, and they will also sell along with beetles the necessary stuff that you need to keep the beetle alive, its food, or if it requires some soil or something for you to grow them, etc. You can. Somebody once told me that you can actually get beetles on a vending machine. So I don't know much about how that happens, but apparently you can. And their love for rhinoceros beetles is quite famous and very old. And with the rhinoceros beetle, they have this Insect World Battle Championship at Tokyo. It is actually conducted to see which rhinoceros beetle can actually fight and win. It's just not this battle, etc. But you will find that there are several toys that are made for kids that is in the shape of the, can you see, this is almost like this one. It has a one and underneath this. And all these, this one resemble this. See here, this one, and here. And there are, I mean, if you have seen Scarabs, Beetles, etc., you will find that they have all kinds of, what can I say, a weapon-like, modifications, so that they can dig, they can prise, they can pull, they can roll. It's like somebody once had commented that dung beetle is like a Swiss Army knife. It seems to have everything it needs to as a tool to do what it wants. So then there is also there is a card game it's called the Mushi King. It's a card game, again, based on various kinds of beetles. So as far as, I mean, Japanese love insects, but the beetles are their favorites. Ram, am I having time still? Can I continue?
Yes, please. Please.
How many minutes
Time
do
is
I
not
have?
an issue. You just continue till you finish. I think all of us are just stuck and fascinated. We are not going anywhere.
Okay. All right. Next, I mean, there are several insects that modern day technologists are looking at, It's one of the things I feel actually sad about is that when I research for all these behavior and things like that, I find that very little of insect behavior is documented in India. I mean, such fascinating work that's going on in the Western world. Here, we find so little work, excepting for one or two, an odd work here and there. Actually, nobody is even looking at the behaviors of insects. And I worry that by the time we decide to look at the behavior, they might well be gone. So, flea beetles. I have a friend in Trivandrum, Dr. Pratapan Divakaran. You should call him Monday to talk about these fascinating beetles called flea beetles, And this particular flea beetle, Podentia congregata, there's a spelling error. Huh? It's A. The automatic spelling, it keeps changing it to E. Congregator. This is the largest flea beetle in South India. Now, I photographed this in Kanyakumari in the Balamore estate, within the Kanyakumari Wildlife Sanctuary. This is the largest of the flea beetles in South India. Okay. And another Podentia, okay, has been researched for its jumping mechanism. Now, they're called flea beetles because, like flea, they are also capable of jumping. And in order to jump, and their jump is like a catapult style. You know, you will find flea beetles, there's several of them, there are lots of, probably some 990 species or something like that. Okay. You'll find them feeding on the leaf surface. But if you go even slightly closer to them, they jump before you know what. In the insect world, I mean, they're not the only jumpers. You know, you have the hoppers which jump like nobody's business. Of course, you have the grasshoppers which also jump, various kinds. But this one's jumping mechanism is slightly different. You'll find that in their hind leg, the femur, that's something equivalent to your thigh, you'll find a expanded part over here that actually helps them to jump. And this jumping mechanism has been thoroughly researched, you know, by CAT scan, 3D dissection, etc. And it has been found that the mechanism that they use for jumping is ideal for a robotic leg design, where the robot can actually jump, or if it doesn't want to jump, it can also walk. So that kind of mechanism, this has been inspired by this flea beetle, a robotic leg design. So there are beetles that are also contributing to designing robots. There are others which have also contributed. There are other insects that are also contributing to robotic leg designs and various other aspects of robotic sights, then, you know, movements, etc. But this particular one has been chosen and it's been found to be pretty good. Okay, and if you want to read about the entire research, this is where your research paper is. Next, for technology, are these what are called as fog basking darkling beetles. Ram tells me that anybody who has seen Animal Planet, David Attenborough's Animal Planet, he had shown these fog basking beetles. These are called tenebrionid beetles. And there is a delightful story about why the tenebrionid beetle stands like this from an old culture, Mexican culture. Apparently, another darkling beetle called the Eliodis was given the responsibility of scattering stars, keeping stars at certain places in the sky. Now, the beetle was so careless that as it moved, you know, the bag that contained the stars, it somehow opened because it hadn't shut properly. And the stars all got scattered all over. And the culture believed that that's how the Milky Way came to be. There are more than one story about who actually scattered the stars for the Milky Way to be, but one of them is supposed to be the tenebrionid beetle. And because the beetle was so ashamed, it got scolded for doing that. It got so ashamed that it puts its head down and it stands. Of course, we now know why it puts its head down and dance, because these beetles that live in the deserts of Namib, you know, Saharan deserts, depend on fogs for their water source. Now, both these, if I can expand this for you, if you notice, it's got little bumps on its back, okay? Now, these bumps have a property where the tips, as they go down, are water-loving. They are hydrophilic. And the sides, both sides, are hydrophobic. They repel water. So as a result of which, what happens is that if it stands like this, the water that falls, the fog, that the dew that settles on their back, then flows right down so that it can actually gather the water and drink it. Its only source of water is the water from fog. So they are called the fog basking beetles. And this particular way, I mean, this might look as it's quite smooth. You know, this has got lots of bumps. You can see there are two different genera of basking darkling beetles. One with the bumps, the other has a smooth elytra. Despite the smooth elytra, it still has minute little bumps which are not easily visible to the naked eye, that allows for water to flow right down like this so that it can gather. Now, this particular water hydrophilic, hydrophobic structure of the elytra attracted some of the researchers. And so two of them, I mean, this is another tenebrionid, the darkling beetle. This is from, I photographed this in Kanyakumari near a railway station. I find that the sandy stretch in railway stations seem to have a lot of beetles. The carabid beetle, this beetle, several of them. So even if you look at a very dry, sandy area, take a closer look, you might find beetles over there. So what happened was that this particular feature got one of the companies to harvest water. You know, in desert, etc., water is such a rare resource. So every bit counts. So what they did was they placed small glass spheres into heated wax so that they could emulate, they could replicate the kind of bumps and crevices that the beetle had on its back. Okay, so that the high peaks and the troughs of the beetle shell could be imitated. And they found that they could gather enough vapor in condensing into water. So they made what are called as vapor harvesting plastic sheeting. So the plastic sheeting had these embedded glass spheres which were heated into wax, okay, to create those peaks and troughs in the plastic sheeting. And then the plastic sheeting placed in such a manner that it could gather as water fell over it, it could gather, and the water could then be collected in a particular container, this way to provide water. And there was also another project in which they used, all the same principle, but, it's a kind of, self-filling vessel. It's not like the plastic sheet that you had to put another vessel to collect it. It was a self-filling vessel, and also based on the same principle of hydrophilic ends and hydrophobic ends. And they found that if the environmental conditions were all right and there was enough humidity in the air, they could collect 3 liters of water per hour because of this principle. So these are two examples of beetles that helped in providing for technological advancements. And I'm going to end my talk with this last story, because I think this story could be repeated n number of times and it still needs to be told. In Australia, there were a couple of entomologists researching this jewel beetle called as Jewelodimorpha bakewelli. And then one fine day, they found that the male of the beetle would go and try to mate with a stubby, the short beer bottle. No matter what, they would not leave the bottle. They thought that the bottle was the female of its species. They once found that there were 9 beetles, 9 jewel beetles on the one single beer bottle with their penis out, trying to push it into the bottle edge, thinking that they could mate. What was even more surprising was that as they tried to mate, and they couldn't because it was a bottle, ants came to eat them. It was so hot that they could be desiccated. No matter what, they died being eaten by ants. They died because of the heat, but they wouldn't leave the bottle. The researchers gave them another bottle to see whether they would like another bottle, but they wouldn't move from the bottle. They brought female of the jewel beetles next to it, but the males wouldn't leave the bottle to go to the female. And what was very touching was when this was reported, the beer company that produced this bottle withdrew its bottle, changed the bottle design, cover, everything, so that the jewel beetle numbers could be saved. We hear of individual gestures that go to save species, but this is an extraordinary gesture by a company that could withdraw its bottles and redesign the bottle, which would cost them quite a packet, you know. And they did it so that a jewel beetle could be saved. In our forests, and I remember one of the researchers from ATRI once told me that they are finding the disappearance of several species of dung beetles from the Western Ghats forests. Would we do something to save their habitat? Because without the dung beetles, imagine what the forest could be like. Who's going to remove all those dirt from there? But they are finding there are beetles that are disappearing. And that is something that we really need to look into, because one doesn't look at a beetle or a dung beetle with that much favor unless it's probably maybe a little colorful or something like that. But beetles have a very important role to play, especially the dung beetles. And I hope something can be done to save them. It's just not dung beetles. We are today very, in today's world, you keep hearing about butterflies and dragonflies, which are already favorites. The moths have become favorites. Beetles are beginning to be favorites. But there are n number of extraordinary insects leading extraordinary lifestyles that could have so much of meaning for us as humans, and that if we don't allow them to survive, who knows, even our own lives can be in greater danger. But insects are disappearing, and I don't know whether anyone in India is even bothered about it. But I hope those who are listening to me over here, I'm telling you, please look out for insects. Look out for their behavior. Don't only look at their size, shape, or something. Look out their behavior. Do something to preserve their habitat, because all they need is preservation of habitat. They know how to save themselves, even if you give them a teeny, tiny space. So I hope you can do something about that. And here's where I end my talk. Thank you so much for listening to me.